Hi, everyone. My name's Curtis Pankow, and today I'm going to be presenting on the third study from my doctoral research that I did at the University of Alberta. The study's titled A Qualitative Process Map of Mental Health Promotion Through the Coach-Athlete Relationship in Canadian University Sport. And I promise it's way more exciting than the title makes it seem. As an overview for this presentation, we're going to go over an introduction on mental health and the construct of interest, which is flourishing. We'll talk briefly about the method, and then we'll get into the results or the actual process map I developed. We'll briefly touch on some implications and potential future directions, and we'll wrap up with some concluding thoughts. For this research, I used the World Health Organization's definition of mental health, which recognizes that mental health is more than the absence of mental illness, but a state of well-being in which a person is able to realize their abilities, handle normal stresses and challenges associated with everyday life, work productively, and are able to contribute back to their communities. With regards to flourishing then, flourishing is a specific way of looking at or model of mental health. And Keyes looked at the World Health Organization and the American Surgeon General's definitions of mental health and said, can we get from where we're at to mental health by doing what we're doing? And essentially what he argued is that we're going to recognize mental health as more than the absence of mental illness, can we get there without actually having models of mental health with distinct dimensions or constructs, or as he actually termed them, symptoms? Flourishing in Keyes's model consists of 2 dimensions of emotional well-being, 6 dimensions of psychological well-being, and 5 dimensions of social well-being. One of the really interesting things about flourishing is the argument that promoting flourishing may serve to prevent or buffer against mental illness. We've also seen that traditional psychoeducational approaches to mental illness prevention, so teaching people about avoiding mental illnesses, while maybe useful at preventing mental illness, are actually unlikely to promote mental health. So we need to focus on things that are going to enhance people's emotional, psychological, and social well-being in order to enhance their flourishing or their overall mental health. In the Canadian University sport context, the first 2 studies of my dissertation looked at flourishing student athletes and coaches. And the first study found that among flourishing student athletes, coaches could play a role in promoting or protecting their student athletes' mental health by helping them manage their expectations. Coaches could also hinder or present a mental health challenge to student athletes when they didn't value their input or opinion. Among coaches, they were able to promote their own flourishing when they felt as though they were helping their student athletes develop personal psychosocial competencies. So helping athletes experience growth helped coaches promote their own flourishing. Given that Canadian university student athletes and coaches appear to reciprocally impact each other's flourishing, and that little is actually known about processes in these close relationships that can promote flourishing, the purpose of my study was to identify how flourishing can be promoted through coach-athlete relationships in Canadian university sport. This study followed Miles, Huberman, and Saldana's recommendations for pragmatic qualitative research, and I specifically focused on following first and second cycle coding in order to generate a process map. This method is similar to grounded theory methodology, but is much more flexible, and given that this research was conducted during COVID lockdowns, it was important to have some methodological flexibility in order to react as things changed. The resulting process map is pictured here. There's a central process starting with shared goals, moving to goal-oriented growth, resulting in flourishing outcomes that's influenced by a number of what I've termed facilitators. Starting with shared goals, it's important that they were developed collaboratively between the coach and student athlete, as that would make it meaningful for both parties. If these meaningful shared goals were developed, then the coach and student athlete would pursue goal-oriented growth. And at this stage, the coach and athlete had different roles that they had to fulfill in order to achieve goal-oriented growth. The athlete had to learn about and engage with the available resources, while the coach had to provide the athlete with resources, teach them about the available resources, and create opportunities, space and time for the athlete to use those resources. If these conditions, if you will, were met and goal-oriented growth was recognized by the coach and student athlete, they would both experience enhanced flourishing outcomes or enhanced emotional, psychological, and social well-being. This process was impacted most proximally by the coach-athlete relationship. If we follow Jowett's work on the coach-athlete relationship, the higher the quality of the coach-athlete relationship, the easier that made this process. And the other facilitators worked largely the same, and they're ordered by my perception of how important they were on this process. So personal facilitators, relational facilitators, and environmental facilitators were all important parts of this process. And the argument is that the more of these things that are present and the higher the quality of the things that are present, the more likely it is that the coach and athlete are going to be able to achieve that goal-oriented growth and experience enhanced flourishing outcomes. In terms of implications, it's important for the student athlete and coach to work collaboratively to develop these goals for the student athlete in season. Student athletes and coaches should also understand their separate roles in the pursuit of goal-oriented growth and understand that it's important that they're both engaging with the things that are around them in order to help the athlete achieve that growth. With regards to the process map, the different facilitators all likely have their own process of influence on flourishing in the sport domain. And it is important to note that the process map is focused on mental health within the sport setting, not looking at more global levels of mental health. That being said, these different facilitators may provide insights into different target areas that can impact that sport domain mental health among both student athletes and coaches. In conclusion, flourishing in university sport is a complex process involving a range of intra and interpersonal factors, and mental health promotion may be best achieved by focusing on growth and strong relationships in sports settings. It's my hope that if we're able to do this, we can make not just university sport, but all sports settings a place where people can come and focus on growth and experience enhanced domain level, sport level mental health that will contribute to their overall mental health as they move through their lives. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed your presentation. Please reach out in the comments or find me on social media or at the conference presentation session if you have any questions, and I look forward to getting to chat.